What do we know? I mean, are they really going to get this done this week?
Well, it looks like first of all, I think there's a lot of political appetite to get something done, especially before the congressional recess starts for the House is at the end of this week, the Senate's at the end of the next week. And what we know so far is that this emerging deal would not only extend the debt limit for 2 years, it would also avoid these very draconian sequester cuts, about $130 billion of cuts just in 2020. And not only would it avoid spending cuts, but it would actually increase discretionary spending by about $35 billion a year. So a nice little fiscal boost going into the election year.
So if we get our checkbook, we can agree on things. I think that's what that proves. But the sequester was put in place specifically to impose some discipline. I mean, what kind of discipline are we going to get in terms of spending?
Yeah, it's interesting, and you're right. So the budget sequester was the aftermath of the Budget Control Act in 2011 to avoid that big debt ceiling kind of brouhaha back in August of 2011.
And the whole theory was we would never trigger it because it was so high.
Right. And of course, what we've found in practice is that Congress really doesn't like spending cuts. And so they've really moved almost every year to actually avoid the sequester. It just happened that this year those cuts were going to be bigger and more draconian, and again going into an election year. So we knew that Congress was going to be loath to actually have those happen. So not surprising that we're seeing them work to avoid them. What is surprising, though, is that this is in advance of the deadline, which, as you know, Congress never does. So the deadline to fund the government to avoid these sequester cuts isn't actually until the fall. So it's nice to see from a market's perspective they're actually moving forward. One
thing I'm interested in, this is just an inside the beltway. What role does Mick Mulvaney play in this? He's the acting chief of staff. He was the original deficit hawk when he served in Congress. Where is he in all this?
Yeah, and what we understand is that he does from time to time make an appearance in these negotiations. But these negotiations from the White House's perspective are largely being led by Secretary Mnuchin of the Treasury. And of course, he has a vested interest in seeing a resolution because of the debt limit. So from what we understand is that Mulvaney hasn't necessarily been sidelined, but he's not playing as integral a role in these negotiations as he has previously.